Hey everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from the Federalist. This one is dated October 15th. It is a long one and it says 14 minutes here, so I don't know if it's going to necessarily take that long. But with my commentary, it might, so just kind of strap on in. It says, the New York Times gaslights about political prosecutions, because we all know the people on the left are like, oh, Trump's going to go come after us. Oh my God. And it's like, you guys know what you're doing right now? Here's a mirror. Take a look in there. So let's go ahead and see what it says. It says, meanwhile, the party in power spent years openly plotting to throw their political opponents in jail. Yep. So let's go to it. It says, the New York Times published a 5,000-word article asserting that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy because a second-term Trump Department of Justice could potentially prosecute members of the Democrat Party. Authors Emily Bazelon and Mattathias Schwartz, not just Matthias, it's Mattathias, make this argument not only after a first Trump term with zero political prosecutions by Trump appointees, but after a shocking and unprecedented nationwide lawfare campaign by Democrats against Trump and other Republicans. Like, look at everybody that was locked up for walking around on January 6th. But anyway, let's see what Miss Hemingway, the author of the article, has to say here. It says, the Times headline is, Why Legal Experts Are Worried About a Second Trump Presidency. The subheading added, in a survey of 50 members of the D.C. legal establishment, which are probably like all Democrats, says many warn that Trump could follow through on his threats to prosecute his political adversaries, though I don't remember Trump saying anything specifically about this. So, I mean, if it's people doing something wrong, yeah, but, whatever. Again, I can't think of anything offhand where he's actually said, yes, I am absolutely going to do this. The term gaslighting has gained popularity in recent years, a reference to the 1944 movie Gaslight about a husband who manipulates his wife into thinking she is insane. Even in the sea of media manipulation, there is perhaps no better example of gaslighting than this piece, because, that's actually what the New York Times does. They are quite literally fake news. The article begins with an unsubstantiated claim that Trump seeks to engage in political prosecutions, like I was just saying. It says the only quote offered in support of this claim is Trump saying people who violate federal election laws will be prosecuted and sentenced, which makes sense regardless of who the president is. So they inaccurately characterize this as Donald Trump could not be clearer about his plans to use the Justice Department to seek revenge against his enemies. Yeah, that's a gigantic leap from what Trump said. Says, the opening paragraph also references Trump supporters chanting "lock her up" of Hillary Clinton, who had gotten away with setting up a secret server to mishandle classified information. Left unsaid by the New York Times is that Trump didn't go after Clinton during his time in office, saying it would be divisive to pursue political opponents. I remember that. It says, the New York Times also doesn't mention that the Democrat National Convention featured chants of "lock him up" when Hillary spoke. Yeah, I remember that too. Says, most importantly, though, the past 4 years saw Democrats at the local, state, and federal levels upend historic norms associated with the rule of law. Here's just a partial list. But I need to take a deep breath before we go into this. And again, remember, it is just a partial list. So, says Democrat New York Attorney General Letitia James ran for office in 2018 on a Soviet-style threat of getting Trump, who she claimed had illegitimately won the 2016 election. The result was a never-before-prosecuted charge of inflated assets and an indefensible $350 million fine. After businesses began to worry that the common bookkeeping approach used by Trump officials might result in similar prosecutions for their businesses, New York Governor Kathy Hochul reassured them that this government action was an extraordinarily unusual circumstance, meaning it would only be used to go after Trump. All right, so and just keep in mind, too, if Letitia James saying Donald Trump had illegitimately won the election, I guess that's election denial. But remember, only Trump is the one who denies elections. It's only Republicans. Okay? Anyway, let's keep going with this. So as Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg worked with a slew of Biden-connected attorneys, and definitely click on this link here to see that, because I have gone over this before. This including Biden's former number 3 at the DOJ, and that's exactly the guy I was thinking about, says to gin up a murky 34-count indictment of Trump for non-disclosure payments, even though no actual crime was alleged and the statute of limitations for looking into the payments had expired. Says billionaire Democrat activist Reid Hoffman, who I believe is actually a Netflix guy. I think he owns Netflix or is the CEO, something like that, secretly bankrolled a civil suit in New York related to outlandish allegations that Donald Trump slipped into a Bergdorf Goodman dressing room in the 1990s and sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll, then a woman in her 50s. George Conway, who had tried and failed to get hired in the Trump administration, helped coordinate the lawfare. A New York jury awarded Carroll nearly $90 million. She and MSNBC's Rachel Maddow giggled about using the funds to go on a shopping spree. Yeah, I remember that too. Just despicable people. Says the Democrat lawfare was even more onerous at the national level. Says the FBI conducted a shocking armed raid of Mar-a-Lago for an unprecedented presidential records and classified document case that has since been dismissed on account of special counsel Jack Smith having been illegally appointed. Prior to that dismissal, criminal selective leaks about that raid were distributed to a compliant press. Yeah, it's always funny how CNN is like always there when one of these raids take place. Just kind of funny. Anyway, keeping on going, so Smith also violated every norm and precedent with his anti-free speech prosecution of Trump related to Trump's concerns over 2020 election administration. Smith had the benefit of several Democrat-appointed federal judges doing everything they could do to fast-track the trial, including removing normal procedures afforded to the accused. Says Democrat groups led an effort to remove Trump from the ballot, supposedly in the name of protecting democracy. The move was so radical, despite media claims otherwise, that all 9 justices shot it down. Yeah, say undefeated. That's not right, but whatever. 9-0, shut out. So here's even more. Says the list goes on and on. Says the Biden DOJ imprisoned conservative media giant Steve Bannon and close Trump associate Peter Navarro for contempt of Congress. Attorney General Merrick Garland was also held in contempt of Congress, but has not been even close to prosecuted, much less imprisoned, and he probably should be. That's just my opinion. Says the DOJ targeted school parents who had protested the radical trans agenda at some public schools as terrorists, raided the homes of pro-lifers, and selectively prosecuted and imprisoned many of them as well under the Unconstitutional FACE Act. And go read what that is if you want to know what it is. I would have to agree it's unconstitutional. It sued states that work to improve their election integrity, including just this week suing Virginia to force it to allow non-citizens to remain on the voter rolls. And why would they be doing that? Because they want to cheat. And then the last bullet point here says Biden's DOJ indicted more than 1,243 of Trump supporters for a protest at the Capitol after doing nearly nothing to the tens of thousands of BLM rioters who wreaked havoc nationwide in 2020. Bingo! Says the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that a law used to target 300 of these defendants and Trump was improperly applied to their cases, a slapdown that hardly slowed the DOJ down. And if I was Donald Trump, I would make sure all those people get out of jail on the first day. So it almost seems like 5,000 words should have been written about how much Democrats destroyed rule of law in this country in short order. Instead, Bazelon and Schwartz say that the fundamental difference between Trump threatening to prosecute various alleged lawbreakers and Biden's DOJ actually prosecuting hundreds of Biden's political opponents is there is no known evidence that Biden instigated these investigations or has tried to influence their outcome. Well, I think we're about to see the rebuttal to that. So this section says Biden meddles a lot. It says, oh, for crying out loud. Good way to start that. It says, first off, the problem with the DOJ's prosecutions isn't which members of the Democrat Party ordered or influenced them. The problem is that they are political prosecutions designed to interfere with U.S. elections. While it's true that Biden didn't take an ad out in the New York Times that said, hey, Garland, please prosecute my top political opponent immediately, he came pretty close to that on the front page of the paper itself. It says, as recently as late as last year, Mr. Biden confided to his inner circle that he believed former President Donald J. Trump was a threat to democracy and should be prosecuted, according to people familiar with his comments, the New York Times announced on its front page on April 2nd of 2022. And while the president has never communicated his frustrations directly to Mr. Garland, he has said privately that he wanted Mr. Garland to act less like a ponderous judge and more like a prosecutor who was willing to take decisive action over the events of January 6th, the report continued, in the article headlined, Garland faces growing pressure as January 6th investigation widens. Biden didn't communicate his frustration directly. He didn't say it in a private meeting with his attorney general or write a memo detailing his desires. He only put it on the front page of a quiet, hardly ever read Democrat Party publication called the New York Times. How would Garland ever possibly find out what Biden had 2 of his staffers tell the New York Times for the purpose of getting a front page story out of it? It says, by comparison, King Henry II's "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest" was far more subtle. Nice. What is the link to that? Oh, just okay. Yeah. Go, if you don't know about that, go ahead and read it. And that's just read it. So Jonathan Lemire and Sam Stein of Politico laundered additional Biden leaks, including complaints about the slow pace of the prosecutions of his political opponent Trump earlier this year, in White House frustration with Garland grows. So it's clearly the fundamental difference between Trump threatening to prosecute lawbreakers and Biden's DOJ is prosecuting all of his political opponents is not that Biden kept his views super secret. So meddling with the DOJ is part of a pattern for Biden. and the infamous January 5th, 2017 meeting where Obama, Biden, and their advisors concocted plans for how to target Trump officials, including incoming National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, it was Biden who came up with the idea of abusing the Logan Act to go after him, according to contemporaneous notes taken by discredited FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok, of all people. The FBI did just that in the days that followed. So they were already plotting against Trump, basically right away. Good people. And remember, you're the threat to democracy, not them. Okay, according to them. And on that note, the New York Times article scandalously pretends that the FBI and DOJ are bastions of objectivity and nonpartisanship, ignoring the mountains of evidence to the contrary. The Russia collusion hoax exposed for Americans just how corrupt these agencies are. As virtually no one was held accountable for their role in that information operation. Clinton and her fellow partisans weren't charged for making up the Russia collusion story. Heck, British spy Christopher Steele is still spreading misinformation about Trump this month. The media who participated in the spreading the information were rewarded with prizes. I think, there were Pulitzers given out. And the government operatives who deceptively leaked in order to keep the hoax going were given lucrative taxpayer-funded payouts. There's FBI attorney Kevin Kleinsmith, who falsified a FISA warrant in order to spy on an innocent American, was given a slap on the wrist of a few months without his law license. Oh, boo-hoo. As the DOJ Inspector General found that there had been 17 major omissions and errors in the FISA warrants used to spy on the Trump campaign associate Carter Page. All right, deep breath, done with that now. New section here says, permanent DC is threatened by Trump. And all I have to say to that is, insert the Donald Glover clip of him just saying, good. That's how I feel about that. It says, maybe the most harmful thing the former president has done to the rule of law is to engage in behavior so reckless that he effectively dared his successor's Justice Department to investigate him. Bazelon and Schwartz opine, and blaming Trump for being a victim of the over-the-top prosecutions and investigations. Yeah, as I'm reading that, I'm like, what behavior? They just, it's funny that these folks just come out and say, he's doing bad things, and they don't actually say what it is. And then just everybody on the left is like, Trump does bad things. They just mirror this, and it's like, well, what? And they're like, you just ask them that simple question, can you give me an example? And they're just like, I don't know. He just does bad things. God. Anyway, it says, they add, it's easy to see what the peril of not investigating Trump's most law-defying conduct might have been. For laws to have credibility, they must be applied to everyone. Well, that's actually true. Because again, this is written after there was almost no accountability for the law-defying conduct of the Russia collusion hoax. But how can the Times reporters write those lines and ignore the obvious weaknesses of all the Trump prosecutions, all of which are now falling apart, incidentally, unless they're leftists caught in an epistemological loop, there we go, where they've never exposed themselves to a news source that discusses those weaknesses, or they just assume all their readers are too ill-informed to know about those weaknesses. I would go ahead and say that it's both of those, actually. Never mind, the point of the article is to introduce a New York Times designed survey of 50 Washington denizens who all completely agree that the man who has pledged to drain the swamp is a threat to the very same swamp. It says 42 of the 50 former officials said it was very likely that a second Trump term would pose a significant threat to the norm of keeping criminal enforcement free of White House influence, the authors claim. Would that be the norm of coordinating legal operations against parents at the behest of special interest groups? Would it be the norm of shock and awe prosecutions of one set of rioters while letting decades of left-wing rioters off easy? What about the norm of not having Barack Obama and Joe Biden help plot aspects of the Russia collusion hoax? What about the norm of prosecuting your top political opponent for his speech in ways that have never even been considered before? What about Democrat prosecutors across the country going after every Republican official they can? What about the attempts to disbar all Republican attorneys to prevent effective election advocacy? Yeah, that's just a new thing that I saw this week, and that's just, again, remember, they're the good guys in their mind. They're, you're the threat to democracy, not them. Says, what are the norms of which the Times speaks? They don't even know. Says, swamp doesn't like guy who promises to drain swamp. Well, of course. Says the Times says it surveyed 50 swamp denizens, half appointed by Democrats and half appointed by Republicans, and that nearly all agree that Trump is a problem. Their first example of a conservative Republican appointee who opposes Trump is Peter Keisler, who is described as a founder of the Conservative Federalist Society and former Bush official. Well, that could be part of the problem. Says, what Bazelon and Schwartz hide from readers, however, is that Keisler is a rabid never-Trumper and board member of the Democrat-funded anti-Trump outfit set up by Democrat activists Bill Kristol and Sarah Longwell and named, however inappropriately, Society for the Rule of Law. The group is so unhinged, is if oft-quoted by Democrat media, that George Conway is its co-founder, primary spokesman, and chairman of the board. It is part of a constellation of groups that were strong opponents of using the Justice Department to perpetuate Democrats' Russia collusion hoax. They're so conservative that their members frequently endorse Kamala Harris, and they have supported every single piece of lawfare against Trump and his supporters, no matter how extreme. For example, the group filed an amicus brief in support of removing Trump from the ballot, a view so extreme that even Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson couldn't support it. Well, that's good, at least. She seems to be making some decent decisions up there. I mean, don't agree with everything, but seems better than I expected her to be. Not saying I'm a fan, just saying that. As the next person quoted is Michael Ludwig, another rabid anti-Trump activist, and another board member of the Democrat-funded and Democrat-launched Society for the Rule of Law. Ludwig was one of the so-called masterminds of the attempt to, it says there twice, okay, was one of the so-called masterminds of the attempt to keep tens of millions of Americans from being able to vote for the candidate of their choice. He called the Colorado ruling removing Trump from the ballot, a ruling soon to be overturned by every single justice on the Supreme Court, a masterful judicial opinion and unassailable and irrefutable in every single respect. So I'd say this is someone who nobody should listen to about anything ever because he's obviously a dumbass. Says Basil and Schwartz also gaslight about the first Trump term. They assert without evidence that Trump interfered directly in the Russia collusion scam that was perpetuated against him. Yeah, we already know there was no evidence against that guy, so try again. Says they admit there is no evidence that Trump influenced any of the completely impotent investigations into some of the corrupt actors who participated in that horrific and damaging lie, but they are upset that he publicly complained about their corruption. Jeez, your fifis were hurt. Too bad. Grow a pair. Says the article also tells a fantastical tale of Andrew McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, who I believe is on CNN these days, being an innocent victim of political prosecution. In fact, McCabe benefited from a DOJ culture that would do anything to avoid prosecuting friends such as him, even as he clearly leaked like a sieve and rampantly lied about some of his leaking. Instead of prosecution, his buddies at the DOJ helped him get a massive six-figure settlement paid for by taxpayers. Yeah, I love when my money goes to something like that. That's sarcasm. Says they quote McCabe saying that investigations and indictments can ruin your reputation even if they don't lead to convictions. You don't say. Says perhaps Donald Trump and his family would have something to say about the efforts to tie Trump up in legal problems, bankrupt him, distract him, ruin his reputation, and ultimately make him lose the election. McCabe, for his part, was rewarded for his role in the Russia collusion hoax and other anti-Trump efforts with a CNN contributorship, among other things. Yeah, that's what I mentioned. So yeah, he's on CNN now, so that's great. All these people do really bad things and they get rewarded for it. Great society we live in. Good examples for our kids. It says strategic leaks to subvert Constitution. The next part of the interminable article is the section dealing with how the unelected bureaucracy might be able to thwart the constitutional authority bestowed on the president if the president is named Trump. As the Times asked its survey respondents whether there were any external checks on Trump's constitutional responsibility to oversee the Department of Justice. As much of what we know about the clashes within the Justice Department in Trump's first term comes from such disclosures, the article says, referencing the deluge of selective leaks from FBI and DOJ officials to the media as part of the Russia collusion hoax that government officials and journalists perpetrated against America. It then quotes Daniel Richman, a former federal prosecutor in New York, without mentioning that he was the conduit James Comey used for his deceptive leaks to gin up the Robert Mueller probe. When Trump was in office, the corporate media gave free rein to an entire galaxy of leakers within the bureaucracy who were trying to sabotage the agenda of the president whose agenda they were supposed to serve and advance. The Times falsely characterized one of those leakers, dubbed Anonymous, as a high-level government official, strongly suggesting that he was a cabinet official. It turned out that he was a low-level official at the Department of Homeland Security. Is it that Miles something dude? Yeah, Miles Taylor. There's his name in that. Okay, yeah. I remember that too. It is understandable that the Times wouldn't want any accountability for the army of leakers it used to spread disinformation about Trump. But it's much harder to understand why any honest accounting of the facts would lead anyone to conclude that Trump is more prone to politicizing justice than the party in power that has spent years openly plotting to throw their political opponents in jail. So excellent article. I wish it was actually more, and it was more like a book, and I'm going to read it because I know she's written some books. Maybe there is something out here. Yeah, maybe I'll have to check out some of her stuff. But yeah, I've read stuff from her before. Anyway, so yeah, do you think this is kind of, the New York Times saying this, like, oh my God, Trump's going to come after us. And it's like, you guys open the door and he's about to use the door that you opened. So boo freaking who, as far as I'm concerned. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Like, share, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.